Somewhere beneath your feet, there may already be a solution to the next drought. Not a pipe, not a pump, not a single moving part. Just stone, clay, and gravity. Arranged the same way people arranged it thousands of years before the word utility existed. This is the story of how entire civilizations survived without a single drop from a modern grid by turning the ground itself into a battery. Not for electricity, for water. Most people who try to store water today make the same mistake. They store it above ground, in plastic, exposed to heat and sunlight. A standard rain barrel holds 50, maybe 100 gallons. It breeds algae in the summer. It cracks in a hard freeze. It's a stopgap, not a system. But go back further, to the deserts of Persia, the hills of the Levant, the canyon city of Petra, the heart of Byzantine Constantinople, and you find something else entirely. Underground cisterns capable of holding not hundreds, but tens of thousands of gallons, staying cool, clean, and stable through entire dry seasons. They weren't primitive. In many ways, they were more sophisticated than what most homes have today. Let's start in Persia with a structure called an anbar, literally water reservoir. These were large underground chambers, often domed, built partially or entirely below grade, and lined with a waterproof mortar called saroj, a mix of lime, clay, ash, and, in some regional recipes, egg whites and goat hair. It sounds strange. It worked for over 1,000 years. Many anbars were paired with windcatchers, tall towers, sometimes as many as 6 on a single structure, that funneled moving air down into the chamber below. That constant airflow kept the water from stagnating and pulled heat out of the reservoir. In desert cities like Yazd and Nain, travelers documented water inside these structures, staying dramatically cooler than the blistering air outside, cool enough, in some accounts, to feel near freezing in the middle of summer. No refrigeration, no electricity, just geometry and wind. Now travel south into the sandstone canyons of what is today southern Jordan, to the city of Petra. Between roughly 300 BC and the 2nd century AD, the Nabataeans built a city of 20 to 30,000 people in one of the driest landscapes on Earth, with an average annual rainfall of little more than a few inches. Their solution was a citywide water network, dams to catch flash floods, carved stone channels and terracotta pipelines to move water for miles, and hundreds of rock-cut cisterns to store it. Some of those cisterns were lined with a waterproof lime plaster that engineers today can still find intact after 2,000 years underground. Petra wasn't just a monument. It was, in effect, one enormous water harvesting machine disguised as a city. Now travel further north and west to Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Byzantine engineers under Emperor Justinian built the Basilica Cistern in the 6th century, a cathedral-sized underground chamber roughly 138 meters long and 65 meters wide, supported by 336 marble columns. Its capacity was staggering, around 80,000 cubic meters, or more than 21 million gallons, enough to help supply the Great Palace through droughts and sieges. And across the Levant, modern-day Israel, Jordan, the wider Near East, entire hillside communities relied on bell-shaped and bottle-shaped cisterns carved directly into limestone bedrock. A narrow opening at the top cut down into a much wider chamber below. That shape wasn't decorative. It minimized the surface area exposed to sun and air, which cut down on evaporation, while the bulging chamber below maximized how much water a single dig could hold. The common thread across every one of these systems, from Persia to Petra to Constantinople: go below the surface, minimize the opening, and let mass and depth do the work a machine would otherwise have to do. Here is why this actually works in plain terms. Soil a few feet down stays far more temperature stable than the air above it. It doesn't swing with the day-night cycle or the seasons the way open air does. Water sitting inside that stable zone benefits from it directly. That stability does 3 things. It slows evaporation, because a small, sealed opening loses far less water to the air than an open tank ever could. In a landscape like Petra's, where every drop of rain might be followed by months of nothing, that difference isn't a convenience. It's survival. It limits algae and bacterial growth because algae needs light to grow, and a sealed underground chamber gets essentially none. That's part of why ancient cistern water was often described as clearer and cleaner than water drawn from an open reservoir sitting exposed to the sun. And it protects the structure itself. No ultraviolet breakdown, no freeze-thaw cracking, none of the slow decay that kills a plastic tank sitting in a backyard within 5 or 10 years. That's not a guess. It's why so many of these ancient cisterns are still standing after hundreds, in some cases well over 1,000 years. Properly built and maintained, this kind of structure isn't designed to last a decade. It's designed to outlive the people who built it. So what does this look like if someone wanted to build a modern version? Step 1. Sizing and siting. A 10,000 gallon cistern needs roughly a 12 by 12 by 10 foot excavation, depending on the shape you choose. It needs to sit below your local frost line, on stable, well-draining soil, and well clear of septic systems or other contamination sources. This is not a weekend shovel project. It is excavation equipment territory, and for something this size, most people bring in a contractor. Step 2. The shell. Modern builds typically use precast concrete cistern tanks, poured in place reinforced concrete, or heavy gauge polyethylene tanks specifically rated for underground burial and potable water contact. Where ancient builders used lime plaster, today's equivalent is a waterproof concrete sealant, or a liner, certified for drinking water use. For reference, a properly installed underground system at this scale typically runs somewhere between $6,500 and $24,000 all in, once you account for excavation, the tank itself, and installation. This is a real construction project, not a free weekend hack, but it is also an investment that, unlike a plastic rain barrel, is built to outlast the house around it. Step 3. Inflow and filtration. Unlike the ancient systems, a modern rooftop-fed cistern needs a first flush diverter, a simple device that automatically discards the first few gallons of any rain event, since that's what carries roof debris, dust, and bird droppings. After that, water passes through a mesh pre-filter before it ever reaches the tank. Step 4. Access and maintenance. A sealed access hatch, an overflow pipe routed well away from the foundation, and a way to physically inspect and clean the tank on a schedule. Ancient cisterns were maintained by hand for a reason. Sealed doesn't mean never opened. Step 5. If the water is for drinking, this is the point where treatment matters. UV purification, filtration, or boiling before consumption. Stored rainwater, however clean it looks, isn't automatically safe to drink untreated. Rainwater harvesting is legal in all 50 US states. Most states have no volume limits at all. A few, like Colorado and Utah, cap collection size or require registration for larger systems, and some states have specific plumbing code requirements if the water is intended for drinking. None of that makes this fringe or forbidden. It just means the same rule applies here as with any home construction project. Check your state and local codes before you build anything at this scale. So if this works so well, why did it disappear from common practice? Simply put, centralized plumbing won on convenience. Once cities could deliver pressurized, treated water straight to a tap, the labor and cost of building and maintaining a cistern stopped making sense for most people. It wasn't suppressed, it was out-competed, the same way the icebox lost to the refrigerator, and the horse-drawn cart lost to the automobile. Nobody hid the technology. It simply stopped being the easiest option once something more convenient came along. But convenience has a trade-off. Dependency. A cistern doesn't care if the grid goes down, a water main breaks 3 streets over, or a drought forces restrictions. It's redundancy, in the truest sense, sitting quietly underground until the day you actually need it. That's the real argument for revisiting this kind of system today. Not because modern infrastructure is a scam, but because a redundant, low-maintenance backup is simply good engineering. The same logic behind a backup generator or a well on rural property. For homesteaders and off-grid property owners specifically, an underground cistern also solves a problem that above-ground tanks can't. Consistency. A cistern buried below the frost line delivers water at roughly the same temperature and volume in January as it does in July, regardless of what the weather is doing that week. That kind of consistency is difficult to replicate with anything sitting exposed to the elements. 1,500 years before pressurized municipal plumbing existed, engineers in Persia, in the Jordanian desert, and under the streets of Constantinople solved the problem of surviving a dry season, not through luck, but through geometry, depth, and patience. They didn't have concrete trucks or waterproof liners. They had stone, lime, clay, and an understanding of how the ground itself could work in their favor. The knowledge never vanished. It just stopped being necessary for most people, most of the time. And for anyone thinking seriously about water resilience today, that's exactly why it's worth another look. If you're looking to build real water resilience, the kind that holds up under an engineer's inspection, not just a headline, this is where you start. Below the surface, not above it.